Two absolutely massive starting pitcher trades happened in the last 48 hours. And if you think there's a clear winner, the Rangers fleeced the Nationals for MacKenzie Gore, or the Brewers fleeced the Mets for Freddy Peralta, this video serves as a way for you to understand all sides of what's going on using some numbers. So we're going screen share style. I'll share this document I'm working through in the video description. And let's start with MacKenzie Gore specifically. So I did another video like this at the deadline where I broke down kind of how you get to a surplus value number, and then compare that surplus value number to the value of the prospects that are going in the transaction to get to an understanding of who is giving up more value on either side of the trade. So I'm not going to get too deep into the specifics of how I'm calculating these things. If you look in the doc, you could probably understand what's going on. The things to roughly understand is that I'm pulling the value of the prospects on the far left down here from Fangraph's farm system rankings. You can see right at the top here, they have dollar values attached to each tier of prospect that I'm going to talk through. The other thing, if you're not totally familiar with like the scouting scale of 20 to 80, we're going to be talking about guys in like the 40, 45, 50 window. And you can see Fangraphs has kind of this player card here that shows you exactly what we're talking about from a production standpoint. So you'll hear this area of like 50 thrown around a lot, which is an average everyday regular, about 2 WAR per season. Just understand that baseline as we talk through everything in this video. MacKenzie Gore specifically, the problem in coming up with a surplus value for him is that he was in an organization that I don't think was particularly good from a pitching development standpoint. Now they are much better with Paul Toboni, Simon Matthews, a variety of the other people they've brought in. But when you're looking at projections, I don't know how much of the soft skill stuff I'm talking about from a coaching change standpoint, from a fact that he won't have the worst catching tandem in baseball going forward. I'm not sure how you bake some of those things in. Perhaps projections kind of touch on it a bit, but they definitely don't touch on the philosophical differences of the Rangers' current regime relative to the prior Nationals regime. As a result of that, regardless of that, when you project him out and say he's like a 2.5 WAR guy going forward, we get to about a $33 million surplus. So there's definitely ways here, if you're the Rangers looking at this, where you can jack that number up $10 million or so. Cutter at the end of last year for MacKenzie Gore was a pretty good pitch. He started adding it. To me, that is the fundamental weapon for him that he needs to figure out. If you look at his plots, he doesn't really have anything going in to right-handed hitters specific. Let me see if I can pull down Savant quick. Yeah, his four-seamer's like middle up. The curveball's down. The changeup's kind of down away for the most part. This is from catcher POV here, so we're looking out at the pitcher. You see that away changeup right there. And then this slider and the cutter are both inside. Listen, these two pitches, if you look at his plot, top right here, they're very similar in shape. And the slider, he threw a lot more, but he threw that cutter about like 10% of the time to right-handed hitters end of the season. I think that, alongside the fact that he's probably throwing too much fastball, even early in count when he's up around like 50, 55%, it's a little heavy in my opinion relative to the shape of that pitch, and also his ability to land some of these non-fastballs for strikes early count. There's a lot of things you could play around with on the MacKenzie Gore side to say he's a better pitcher than the 2.5 WAR, 2.7, depending on where you're looking, projection. Totally understand that, but we're just going to work off the fact that this is what his surplus value is at $33 million. Now, the really odd part of this deal is all the prospects given up. This is where the variance comes in. I think when you look at MacKenzie Gore, the number isn't going to be dramatically different off this 33 to 40 area. I think in most organizations internally, I actually saw one organization has them around like 47, I think it was, in terms of their actual like surplus value, however they calculate it. So, you know, in that window, the prospects here is a lot of variance. We're going to start with Fangraphs. This is the pessimistic outlook. This is if you're the Rangers giving up these guys and you say, we think we got an absolutely smash deal here. Gavin Fien is the piece. So he's a 45 plus future value bat, which is going to equate to about $8 million. I created like a second tier down here in this window, which is between the 50 and the 45 because I thought the gap was too big. So we could say like these guys are the border guys, but Fangraphs specifically has him rated as like a 45 plus bat. Alejandro Rosario is this guy who was absolutely electric a couple years ago, one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. It sounds like he's getting Tommy John surgery. He's missing all of 2026. There was some other medical stuff going on as well that I've seen some floating of the reporting of. I don't entirely know what specifically was up, but he will be down 2 years from throwing competitively, very much like Andrew Painter-esque, despite not having the pedigree of an Andrew Painter. Fangraphs has him as like a 45 future value pitcher. Massive risk there. Like, this dude never throws a pitch in Major League Baseball. I will not be surprised. If he posts a 5 WAR season, I will also not be surprised. His range of outcomes is very flat, in my opinion. He's not a high floor guy at all. And then Devin Fitz-Gerald is a guy that the Fangraphs has rated as like a 40 plus future value bat. We'll go Yeremy, Cabrera, and Ortiz. I think are more just org throw-ins, so not too much value there. This says the Rangers gave up $15 million less than they got in surplus value from a guy like MacKenzie Gore. If you're the Rangers and Chris Young, you're looking at this going, absolutely, we agree with that. That's what our internal models have. We don't love the high school bats in Fien and Fitz-Gerald, despite the fact, we drafted them where we drafted them. Rosario, we know internally more probably than Nationals do from a health standpoint. Cabrera, Ortiz, kind of more throw-in pieces. Okay, that's the Rangers. Now we move to my angle, which I think is more balanced. I had a take on X that I thought it was an underpay, so maybe my brain sided initially with this Rangers calculation in terms of them not giving up a lot of value for MacKenzie Gore. But we can also rationalize. Let's even it out. What do you have to do to even out the value on each side and say this is a fair trade for the Nationals and the Rangers? Fien, you're going to have to upgrade. That's why I have him noted in red here, right? So he goes up to about $18 million, $10 million jump if you border him between that 45 and 50. So you say, I know he's a high school player, but if he's right on the border of 45 to 50, then he's in that $18 million window. So that's what I'm going to upgrade. Perhaps industry perception maybe hasn't totally caught up with how good he could be. The other guy I'm going to upgrade is this Devin Fitz-Gerald kid. Decent batted ball data. He's a switch hitter. Sounds like you can play all around the diamond. This is another guy. You could jump him a full, which you'd say like a half grade here, jumping him up to a 45 plus. That alone, leaving Rosario and the org guys as they are, as the Rangers have them, this allows this deal to be about an average trade, right? We're talking almost perfectly equivalent value here based on the numbers I'm using. Then you go to Paul Toboni here, which is the fun one. This is what I imagine if you're Toboni, you're looking at going, we are getting a huge amount of value here. I'm not even going to play with Fien's projection. I'm going to keep him at the 45 plus to 50 area, keep him at 18 mil. The one that I'm going to jump is Devin Fitz-Gerald. I'm going to jump him like a quarter grade, a half grade up, which is going to push his value pretty up there. And then Rosario is the other one that I think maybe internally, perhaps because they don't have internal medical stuff on him, whatever going on, they also maybe think he's higher up. This is how you get to a window where you have about $11 million of surplus, where you're, as the Nationals, are getting $11 million and the Rangers are overpaying by about $11 million. Those are the three angles you can look at this trade. You can look at any of these sides and say, okay, I agree with that. And that's how I'm going to attribute or create my opinion off the value being given up in this decision. The issue, I don't even say it's an issue. Let's just say the conversation here that's fascinating to me is around the high school hitters, because I think there are philosophical differences based on the timelines of organizations on how they value high school talent presently. If you're the Nationals and you're valuing 27, 28 wins, MacKenzie Gore is basically useless to you. So in that sense, I could see them internally looking at the high school guys going, listen, back with the Red Sox, we wanted these guys. Like, we're going to bring up this Kylie McDaniel tweet here. Red Sox will all over Fien in the draft. Texas takes him a few spots ahead of them. Then the Red Sox scouting brain trust goes to Washington and makes Fien the headliner in the biggest trade. Definitely connected there, right? I don't know if the Nationals have already built out a new draft model, but it doesn't matter. Toboni and the crew saw it in Boston, loved Fien, and obviously view him as a guy that I definitely don't think is in like this 40, 45 window. It's probably more in this 50 area, especially when you're looking at the value of 2028 plus wins. That is a big thing to consider, because I think Fangraphs takes a bit more of a negative outlook, which is probably where my bias is, where you have to discount things that are going to happen in the future. And as a result of that, it's very hard to take a high school hitter who's probably 4-ish years away and upgrade him to the point where he's like a 50 future value player. I also think it matters from the Rangers' perspective of just having the right prospects, having the right guys that Toboni had history with, that the Red Sox liked, that matched in this trade beautifully. So I think it's a fool's errand to look at other prospect lists and devise a solution as to what this other team would have given up in order to get a guy like MacKenzie Gore based on the equivalent value of like a first rounder in last year's draft, a third rounder of Devin Fitz-Gerald, fourth rounder, whatever he was, Alejandro Rosario, top end pitching prospect who's hurt. Just so much context needed around these guys to understand exactly what's going on. Okay, why perhaps does Toboni love Fien and Fitz? I'm going to bring up some data here, talk through it. This is more advanced data that I looked through. I'm looking through hitters. I pulled it. I don't believe any of this info is public, so fun to look at it. Fien's data, unfortunately, he saw 164 pitches, so we can't really go off much here. You could, peruse this data. I'm not even going to really point anything out. For the most part, like, he looks fine. It is what it is. I want to see next year. The thing I will point out is on here, which is Fangraphs evaluation. I think Eric Longenhagen does one of the best jobs in the industry of contextualizing a lot of the nuance around hitters and pitchers. Kylie McDaniel's right there with him as I just pulled up his tweet. Fien, the thing I want to point out, Longenhagen kind of downgraded him on his personal head in his list because what I would sum it up to, I know this is like really small, there's nowhere you're going to read it. I'll link to it in the video description. The thing that I just want to point out, the last line here, instincts around the viability of his swing. Fien is an interesting hitter in terms of how he looks in the box. That's Fitz right there. Let's go to Fien. And just take a look at some hacks. He's a very upright hitter. So you can see his swing. It's interesting. There's a comp in here that I can't figure out in my head of like upright, not really getting into his legs too much, although I'd want to obviously see force plate data to back that up. But really upright dude, you know, inside out swing, really level through the zone. A lot of oppo here is just bias on the sample I pulled. Some open side stuff, right? Super, super upright in terms of how he swings, really level path. It's an unorthodox swing. I don't look at that swing and go, that's 25 homer pop. I know he's a decent defender. He's perhaps versatile in that respect. You could project him favorably. But, you know, I get Longenhagen's point here in terms of being not totally sold on the swing itself and wondering whether at higher levels it gets exploited a bit. On the other end, Toboni maybe looks at this and goes, I don't really care. I think he does a great job in terms of force creation or the interviews we had with him. You know, the makeup stuff here is super important, I imagine, with high school kids. That definitely can matter a ton. So Toboni looks at that and goes, I love it. On the Fitz-Gerald side, Fitz-Gerald, don't entirely know how this works from like a merit standpoint, whether his mom was a Fitz, his dad was a Gerald, or vice versa, but I'm sure we could all speculate on that. Fitz is a little bit different. Switch hitter. The comp was to Jedd Lowry here, which I thought was interesting, but of course it's again a high percentile comp. Jedd Lowry, very good hitter. This is some lefty swings, left-handed swings. Again, he's a switch hitter, really still. You know, yeah, I see the Jedd Lowry-esque nature of it. Not the best batted balls here again, but his sample's a little bit bigger. So when we look at his stuff, we could kind of back into like, yeah, okay. Like this dude hits the ball pretty hard for, I believe he's 20 years old. He'll be 21 next year. The contact zone control looks really good. I like that. The whiff's low, zone whiff's low, chase is low. Like he's probably the piece of this that you could honestly project a little more favorably than a guy like Fien, despite the fact that Fien was like a top 15 overall. What was he, 12th overall in the draft? Yeah, I think Fitz-Gerald looks pretty good, especially from a switch hitting nature of things. He doesn't look as great from the right side of the plate, but that's not going to matter a ton. The one thing I'll leave you with here, as I hope you're kind of changing perhaps your perspective, or at least understanding all the sides here in terms of how these trades could have come to be. The one thing I'll mention, high school bat projection is something I want to dig into more. I just pulled some basic aging curves here, specifically on like a batted ball quality standpoint from an age perspective. Now, again, I think the main thing to ID is understanding where the guy's bat speed is relative to where it could be, almost like an expected bat speed number. This is something I know teams construct internally based off, you know, ground reaction force information, raw strength as a player. That's why obviously being strong and creating explosive movements is really important for batted ball, for pitch velocity, and some of the things that teams value. So that is a huge point. Even with that said, if we just assume Fitz-Gerald's around average and all this stuff, and Fien is in the same window, then if these guys are in this 19 to 20 year old window, by the time they're like 23, 24, we can add another, you know, let's say tick or two of 90th percentile exit velocity, which would push these guys up. So you do that to Fitz-Gerald. Let's say he gets to 106. That'd be sweet. Let's say he gets to 105.5. You know, now what we're looking at here from a 90th percentile exit velocity standpoint is pretty above average. Like this is good stuff here. This is maybe why you look at these two guys and go, yeah, like if we could juice these guys up, they get stronger over time, they become more mature. You're now sitting in a window where 106.5, so right in this area is about 80th percentile in the minor leagues. That plays in the major league. So this is a long-term thing for a guy like Toboni in terms of rebuilding the organization. Perhaps frustrating for Nationals fans. I totally understand, given the fact that they did the Soto deal and now they realize that didn't work because the infrastructure in place was so bad from a development standpoint. They have to redo the infrastructure and basically trade the Soto pieces for more. We'll see if Abrams and Wood goes. I hope this is a good understanding of what I think transpired from a value standpoint in the Gore trade. Quick break here. Then we're going to talk Peralta. My gut reaction with the MacKenzie Gore trade was that the Rangers didn't give up enough for Gore. As I thought through it, as we just saw, I think I came more to the understanding of all sides and probably thinking it's a pretty fair deal. My gut with the Freddy Peralta trade was the opposite of that. I thought the Mets gave up a bit too much for 1 year of Freddy Peralta, but a lot of implications there that I think could make this deal better for the Mets. And essentially, as I calc it out here, we're looking at pretty even without me really fudging too much, not having to play around with the prospect valuation, partially because I think there's more consensus around it when guys get to the majors or closer to the major league level. Why would the Mets give up two of their, let's say, top 6 or 7 or 8 prospects for 1 year control on Freddy Peralta and, let's say, 5 years of control on Tobias Myers, who's more of a throw-in piece that has some variance to actually maybe make this deal a bit more comfortable for the Mets? multiple reasons. They have an SP glut, I think, coming down the pipeline. Not presently the Mets, but Christian Scott, Jonah Tong, Jonathan Santucci, Wenninger. There's a lot of guys in that system that if you start graduating that all McLean, it gets a little bit heavy, especially when you consider that in the context of the 2026 free agent class from a starting pitching standpoint, where you have Tarek Skubal if they want to try to pursue him, Chris Sale, Kevin Gossman, Peralta, as we just talked about, unless they extend him, which is another consideration to be had in this value calculation here. Shane Bieber, Corbin Burns with an opt-out, Brandon Woodruff, like it's pretty good. And then as you go to 27, it gets even better. Logan Gilbert, Zach Wheeler, Joe Ryan, Glass now, Pablo, Sonny Gray, Justin Steele. Like it's pretty loaded from a variety of angles here. And I think that matters in thinking from the Mets perspective of we want to be better now, but also be better in 2 to 3 years. This is a big project for Cohen to be consistently competitive. And it makes sense to give up Sproat, who, I think is a good pitching prospect. I think the industry soured on him a bit. Not entirely sure why. We'll talk about that in a second. What I want to talk about first is Freddy Peralta's surplus. Pretty easy calculation here. We have to factor in some element of the qualifying offer. And there's probably some rough element of I can extend him or we have leverage in the extension, maybe wrapped into the QO, which is something I'm not going to try to value. So I'm just throwing QO value at about 5 mil on a guy. 8 mil owed, projected for 3 WAR. Tobias Myers is a tough one. Most people would probably consider him like a 45 pitcher, which is a $4 million arm. If you calc it out, and I'd say almost like a somewhat pessimistic calc out here, tough to see him amassing like 130 innings. And I think his salary, again, I'm just kind of spitballing it here. CBA implications are massive. Anyways, you get about 44 million surplus from the Peralta-Myers combo, and you're giving up 49 from Sproat and Jett Williams, who I think are consensus both 50 future value guys. So they're in that kind of 20 to $30 million window. Peralta is fascinating in a variety of angles. His fastball is really good. He gets a ton of extension down the mound. It's an average arm angle, yet his release height's really low because of that extension. So the fastball really flattens out at the top of the zone. The element that I think is interesting for the Mets to play around is the slider. This thing moves a ton in season. You could kind of see that from the dots here in terms of the pitch variance you're running into. I don't love these plots. I'd rather see like every single dot because then you could kind of drill in and see that he had some at the end of the year that were lingering around here, which this plot doesn't signify occurred. But go back to 2024, look at that shape difference. Look at how much that moves, right? This is what I'm talking about. It seems like he just kind of lost the feel for this pitch. And 2022, it even had more sweeps. So it's tightened up over time. This is the offering that I wonder whether the Mets try to target and make him better. I get he had a really good season last year, but he didn't use what in the past was one of his best pitches. You could see that from the slider usage down here on the left side. He was like sub 10% either hand as a hitter. Go back to 23, 22% to righties. Even in 24, I think he threw a good amount, 22%. They just lopped off that pitch. Was the feel incorrect on it? That's the offering that I think the Mets can maybe try to optimize and get him above this 3 WAR projection where you're hunting 3, 5, 4. If they extend him prior to that and then make that adjustment, you're probably even more comfortable with the future value here on a guy like Peralta for the Mets, surpassing that of what you gave up in Sproat and Jett Williams. I also think I mentioned my Substack, which I'll plug quickly and I'll throw a link to in the video description. He moved on the rubber in 25, way over towards the third base side, maybe better angular or visual advantage for him against right-handed hitters, despite the fact he wasn't throwing the slider. Seemed to work. Sproat, fascinating pitcher. I had him 12th in my top 40 pitching prospect list. I like him. I think he's a horse. I think it's more of a high floor over high ceiling, if that makes sense. I don't know what his ceiling actually is. If you look at him, his fastball backed up pretty hard, four-seamer, when he jumped up through the minors, and as a result of that, he started throwing a bunch of sinker. And the sink sweep angle to righties actually didn't work totally well in the majors. I think those both are good pitches. I'm not entirely concerned there. The lefty approach, he's just going to mix guys to death. He's a bit of this lower slot, not like totally low slot. He's a bit below average. Average arm angle's around 40 degrees. So he's lower than average and he cuts the ball relatively well. Doesn't spin the ball great, but enough to create a decent sweeper shape. And he throws really hard, which is the other element here that is, I think, really strong. Velo was down at the beginning of the year at AAA. It rose as he went throughout the season. The final couple months for him at AAA were fantastic. The prior chunk, I think, is the reason why a lot of people maybe soured on him and think he's a reliever. This is a starter mix to me in terms of what he could do with the baseball. The Brewers have to be viewing him as a starter. I don't entirely understand the fade on his profile. And Jett Williams is fascinating. Short dude, listed at 5'7". There's only 4 other hitters in minor league baseball last season who had a higher 90th percentile exit velocity. So some bit of a proxy for raw bat speed than him. And he's got some juice. Like, this dude is tiny and he hits the ball really hard. I love the fact he doesn't put the ball on the ground a ton, doesn't chase. It's good zone control. What is he? It's a great question. What I know he is, he's a Brewer, because all the Brewers players seem to be this undersized, kind of decent bat speed type. And I like everything I'm seeing from a data standpoint on him. The damage on contact is really good, especially if he sticks up the middle of the field. Maybe that's what the Brewers are going after, like these second base types like Frelick and Terang that could actually create some bat speed and drive the ball. Contact looks fine, whiff looks fine. More average, so maybe that regresses a bit. I don't think it's impact offense, but if he's average defense, decent offense, that's how you get to a 50 future value. I'll just show his swing a little here because he's got some juice. I love this second swing we're going to see. That's a little down the line action. This next one here, he drives this ball. This was like 107 off the bat, I think. 108 off the bat. The thing that jumps out to me, I'm going to do some body looking here, but his low quads are huge. He's a shorter guy, but he's kind of jacked just from looking at his lower body and how it moves. See right there too, the quad definition, low quad. Like he's really developed. I don't know how old he is. I can try to grab that quick actually. But he's like, you're looking at this from like an SNC standpoint, strength and conditioning. Yeah, he's 22, so his body's probably pretty mature here. I don't think he's a guy you can add a bunch of mass to. So we were talking in the Gore segment about 20-year-old Devin Fitz-Gerald, 19-year-old Fien adding bat speed. I kind of think Jett's maybe maxed out on the bat speed side of things. So again, it caps the ceiling, but I think there's a floor here. And perhaps people got prospect fatigue around the fact that these guys have floor. Maybe their upside isn't massive, but if these guys are everyday regulars and the Brewers have no shot of extending Peralta, I think it's a win-win for both sides here. So I'm not going to give you the entirety of like the iterations of how this trade becomes big and bad, etc. for either side. I think it's fair on both ends. I initially thought it was a bit of an overpay for the Mets, but contextualizing where they are and trying to compete with the Dodgers, Freddy Peralta is somewhat necessary. They have a lot of depth. This is a byproduct of a great farm system and what they've done on the pitching side, what they've done on the hitting side. So kudos to them for building it out in a way that they're actually able to trade from that surplus and upgrade their major league team presently while still holding an organization from a farm system standpoint that is really strong. Thanks for watching this video. Just wanted to get this one out quick because I thought these trades were fascinating. Working with a hoarse voice here a bit. Sick, I guess. I don't feel sick, but I guess my voice is gone. So thanks for begrudgingly listening to me talk about ball as always. Yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Take care.